Welcome back. I'm Tyler, you're watching Scarfing Scarves, and welcome to the 17th installment of Last Week Lolita News. At the top of the segment, I had an entire spiel planned here for the various releases that have come up since I took a nosedive into the online presence equivalent of a medically induced coma. There was going to be at least one potshot taken at Cirque du L'Etoile for reasons that should be obvious to anyone who isn't colorblind and currently humping the poor wretch that thought rapping heart was too simple. And I'm certain there would have been plenty of material to be hashed out with Angelic Pretty's nearly fetishistic tribute to iconography oft associated with fat old virgins in funny hats. However, none of that matters now because fucking melty cream donuts! Fuck this, fuck this, fuck this, fuck this. This is the single most important print of 2016, and anyone who says differently can take their food print phobic, generally agreed upon shit taste directly to the office of bitter bitches on a diet who can't possibly understand the pure unbridled joy of printed baked goods. We're goths. Fuck you both. I am not currently entertaining opinions from people who don't salivate on sight of this glorious tribute to olive fried dough, and for those of you still awaiting the day that honey cake sees its time in the sun once more, I urge you not to give up hope entirely. Sure, we only had to wait 3 years for a Melty Cream Donut re-release. Angelic Pretty has been known to butcher things a la that of Milky Planet, and it's been about 5 years since you've seen the faintest hint of a pancake print from a brand that's pitched itself face forward into a tacky, cross-ridden, Otome-inspired pseudo-classic clusterfuck. But miracles do happen. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Moving on to social news, it would seem the Lolita community has been busy in my absence. Facebook group Plus-Size Lolita Sales English Only angered the village idiot with a sales post that could be interpreted as misleading if you read at a first grade level, haven't been on the internet for more than 5 seconds, and just gave your PIN number to a Nigerian prince. The breakdown in communication began with one poster's attempt to sell a few brand name dresses with the usual system of post your shit and answer 20 stupid questions. One of the dresses happened to be Wonder Queen, and due to Facebook's requirement that a price be entered before anything can be posted, the seller entered the entirely common placeholder of $1. This practice is usually implemented because multiple items will not have the same price. The actual price is usually listed right above or below the pictures, and everyone agrees that this system is pretty self-explanatory for anyone who hasn't just come out of a cryogenic coma after spending the last 50 years in the back of a Pollo Loco freezer. Some ask why it would take 50 years to find them, others know that anyone who legitimately believes that a brand dress will go for $1 is best left to terrify the new workers out of lighting a blunt next to the cinnamon churros. So the seller posts her brand dresses for sale, pops in $1 as a placeholder, and waits for someone to buy her stuff. One Facebook notification later, and the seller is confronted with the following. Those of you with the attention span of a carrot should know that the commenter asserted annoyance with the fact that the dresses were not, in fact, $1, accused the seller of being the primary reason she could never buy anything, opined that Wonder Queen was made of cheap cotton, questioned the shipping costs, and ended on the assurance that she's sorry but she won't be buying a damaged dress. Not to be reined back into the realm of social etiquette that could be expected from a functioning adult, the commenter proceeded to argue it out with several well-meaning individuals unlucky enough to waste keystrokes on the education of a temperamental ball of pocket lint, the effect of which was made plain quite shortly after when she blocked one Good Samaritan and posted her harrowing experience on the main page with the age-old flouncer's favorite of why can't Lolitas be lovelies? No, seriously. I'm sure the community will miss her unsolicited advice on the pricing of expensive specialty dresses, and while I don't know it for certain, I like to think that she's happy in whatever dollar store parking lot she's currently living in. Be free, you beautiful cheapskate. Be free. Turning towards the type of news that makes me want to swallow several spoonfuls of Xanax and go for a nice long trip to fuck humanity in general, public Facebook event Disneyland Lolita Day met with more than its fair share of clinical trials, with a case study in millennial entitlement not usually seen outside of the bounds of a baby boomer's porn stash of confirmation bias and 52 reasons why youth culture is obviously more outrageous than wrecking the environment, exploding the debt, and ramming the economy like a 2-bit dish rag horrific system of credit abuse and outstanding executive criminal negligence. Because fuck man buns, am I right? Now get back in the tiny house because we can't afford anything above the size of a small child's fort. It all began with a button. An annual event that began in October of 2013, Disneyland Lolita Day is a privately hosted public event for Lolita fashion enthusiasts that is to this day entirely unaffiliated with the park itself. Disneyland is merely the meeting place and as such covers none of the cost of attending, nor does it provide any frills for the participants. Any gifts for the attendees come out of the pockets of the hosts themselves, and as the last estimate for the event was at 353 confirmed RSVPs, you might imagine some level of personal expense on their their part when they shell out each year for their commemorative buttons. What's that? Oh yeah, it's the sound of their wallets dying. Due to the rising popularity of their event, they released the following update on the buttons usually provided to semi-appropriately dressed attendees. There were literally 2 rules involved in getting a button. Wear Lolita and breathe. Granted, the breathing had to be done specifically at the event, but you get the idea. You wear Lolita and show up at the event, and you get a button. It was the absolute minimum to be expected of anyone with 2 hemispheres connected well enough to dress themselves in the morning. And given that this was intended to be an event for people with enough money to attend a day at freaking Disneyland, surely the participants could manage that much. Oh, ye of too much faith. After a small mix-up in which someone tried to get offended over a Snapchat account that the organizers don't even have, the first comment came in like so. This has changed my taste for this event. I hadn't planned on going because I'm not into Lolita. Cut! Roll clip.
She doesn't even go here!
Thank you. The commenter continued on to protest over the fact that what qualified as a Lolita outfit would be left up to the host's discretion, read no t-shirt and jeans, and ended on the insistence that DLD was supposed to be, quote, fun and exciting, not judgmental, and that one's perception is different from another's. So, following that logic, to some this might sound like complete bullshit, but to others it's still complete bullshit. Luckily for those of us actually in the Lolita community, she was on board to normie-splain to all of us just how it should be done. And while you might amuse yourself by pausing long enough to read her every comment until your brain falls out of your ears and melts into a pile of glitter and anger, she was not alone. Enter Amanda. 29 years young and far too old to pull half the shit she did in a public forum, Amanda made plain that she felt judged by the button policy. And after spitting out some half-baked nonsense on the ongoing crusade undertaken by all Lolitas to fight against judgment of any kind out of some misguided magical girl syndrome I suspect is treatable with the right medications, she settled onto a line that will be burned into the back of this reporter's mind until Trump says anything else on live TV. Why inflict that pain on those who can't yet afford a full cord when you fight against others judging us? Let me reiterate that this was about a free button. Amanda went on to insist that having buttons at all takes every bit of fun out of the event, and after some random drivel about how every event was supposed to be a happy Lolita fun time, she concluded that the concept of providing buttons at all was, quote, downright cruel to people like her. No, it's not worth it. People more patient than me had the poor fortune to question her on how she could pull cruelty out of the stipulations of a small metal disc, and after waxing poetic about how it was the principle of the matter, she revealed that they had made her feel like she shouldn't come at all, doubled down on the strict button standards being specifically cruel to poor creatures such as herself, and implored the host to ixnay the buttons entirely in order to avoid punishing her for not having an outfit. Because fuck everyone else, if I don't get a button, there shouldn't be any at all. But wait, it gets worse. Because rather than accept the fact that a free button is not the end of the world and attend the event like a normal person, Amanda went on to list her financial woes, chronic disabilities, insist she's being attacked, accuse the page of being a bullying clique with the note that she's extremely sensitive due to her history of harassment, claimed that she was being segregated, and finished with the assertion that she was again, quote, being punished for not being able to put together something that meets this particular host's standards. It should also be noted that her dad died when she was 9, which makes total sense to bring up about a button if you— What? It's a free button! What am I fucking reading? No, I'm going to finish this. She then all capped that she wasn't looking for pity, further asserted that she was being bullied out, and declared that those people attempting to show her the basic tenets of reality were, quote, being attacky. Attacky is not a word, and while I'm sure that we could spend a good minute bashing our heads against the wall over its debasement of the English language in general, the ride had one more downhill slide, and, like a true martyr, Amanda ended her spree of unsolicited personal details and pity-mongering with the most epic flounce ever thought up by an over-caffeinated teenage girl. Which, if you pause and squint, should basically read like, you're all bullies, Lolitas are supposed to be lovely, something toxic, and here's a random picture of me for you all to tear to shreds because for all my years of harassment, I've obviously learned nothing and must add one more log to the fire. Because that makes total sense if your entire goal is to further a victim complex that may be the only distraction between you and the realization that the people around you aren't persecuting you because you're a beautiful snowflake, but rather reacting to the fact that you're about as personable as a bucket of feral cats. And then she apologized. It's pretty rare when a stage 5 fit gets a sudden redemption, and as I scrolled through what I felt like was a sincere wall of text detailing how she had had a bad day, was a poor communicator, and threw sorries out to anyone within spitting distance for good measure, I paused near the end to make sure I was reading correctly. For right there, in the dead middle of an apology that should have warmed the cockles of my cold, dead heart, was the insistence that the existence of the buttons was an alienating force, and the claim that she doesn't feel safe going now because she's received threatening messages online and is worried that showing her face among the mean Lolitas may have her wearing cement tea parties straight to the bottom of the enchanted lake. Okay, the cement tea party bit was mine, but her apology still read, "Sorry, sorry, sorry, help, I'm being oppressed!" Of course, when pressed for details on the names of the people she had to block for sending her, quote, threatening messages in order to bar them from the event, she suddenly had mobile troubles, forgot everything, and ducked under the completely unsubstantiated claim that the Southern California Comm had a history of threatening her safety in ways that both terrify her and perhaps even distract her from the fact that this entire charade started with a free button. Because that's what this was about. A free button. Makes you think, don't it? As that about wraps up what I can tolerate without lighting the nearest Forever 21 on fire, we turn towards part 2 of last week Lolita News' latest special segment, in which I recap what you forgot, you immediately wish I hadn't, and we undertake a journey onto the same topic that your racist uncle likes to bring up every Thanksgiving over a bowl of mashed potatoes and communal white guilt so thick you could cut it with a spork. No sharp objects allowed around the family moon unit. Quick grab it before he goes into his theories on the gays. Welcome to Can Black People Be Lolita? Part 2. The answer is still yes. But first, a quick recap. If you recall, when we last left off, the slow-burning trash fire that started it all was this wig from Gothic Lolita Wigs. The photo of the product was published in 2015, and rather than treat the matter with the sensitivity necessary to tackle race relations a la the usual system of "so sorry, dear God, don't kill us," a representative of the Houston, Texas-based company said black women will never buy a wig if they see it on a cute girl with frilly clothes, tried to point fingers at Lock Shop to distract from their own digressions, and finished with the line that they're really busy and have to get back to working on most important things. This was, of course, after the company answered the question of why there weren't more dark-skinned models on their website with, "Some of our models are actually tan, we just brighten their skin to give them a more doll-like appearance as part of our company image." Damage control on the watermelon incident continued in the days and months after, with everything from insistence that the wig was based off a song by Beyonce, to lauding the fact that they're a minority-owned company, to hugging their black friend so tight his eyes nearly bugged out of his skull. Finally, the owner John Rieger sent out a newsletter some months after the photo's release in which he stated that he is a Chinese American, finds it very upsetting to be called a racist or to be perceived as one, and unsubtly pushed their makeup artist to the forefront like no one had ever seen the adjacents to melanin defense ever before. I have a black friend, so I can't be racist, insert coin here for more overplayed cliches aside. The fact that the owner, John Rieger, is a Chinese American brings a special light to the issues facing black people in Lolita fashion. And that brings us back to the matter at hand, which I'd like to address with an answer to perhaps the most pertinent question in the previous video. Why the hell did I bring this up? And for once, the answer is simple. I dug up the Gothic Lolita Wigs watermelon incident from the dust of 2015 because for all its dated nature, it is still the most relevant encapsulation of the Black Lolita experience. In short, the ensuing fallout and defense by the company is what it means to be black in Lolita in miniature. Take that incident as a mock-up for what's happening at large in the fashion itself, and you have a route to our next question. What does John Rieger's country of origin have to do with it? The same country as the popular website Taobao, known within the Lolita community for cheaper or alternative indie brand dresses, shoes, and accessories not to be found from the main brands. As of July 1st of 2016, China has a population of 1.4 billion people. It was also the country that produced this.
改变只需一颗俏皮洗衣溶珠， 俏比全国招生热线。
That was made in 2016. That is an advertisement for a laundry detergent. And that dolphin is a racist dickhole. The offenses of waterfowl fuckwits aside, the reality of the matter is that within the bounds of China itself, the advertisement didn't even drum up offense. Sure, shoving a black person into a washing machine to remove their color and produce a pale Asian man on the other end might sound like an offense that will get you shot in nations with more diversity than a luncheon on Wall Street. But for the land that would rather put nets on the outside of factories than to catch up on some basic human rights, the 1.4 billion have a little something in common. Mainly that they're all Asian. In 2010, 91.5% were counted as ethnically Han Chinese, with the other 8.5% being overwhelmingly members of other Asian groups. The indistinguishable micro-minorities may as well be a speck of glitter at a beach, and if you care to look until you go blind, you still won't see anyone that could name an image of black people outside of popular American culture, which is kind of a shit way to learn about them due to baked-in racism, undercasting, and overwhelmingly villainous and unsavory roles for the sake of filling into white people's preconceived notion of the overly aggressive black male and loud, angry black woman. Racism, America's #1 export. To be followed right after by its debt, which is owed to, oh, I don't know, China. But I digress. It's no trade secret that doing business in China means looking at primarily Chinese customers. Lolita is no exception to that rule, and I'm willing to bet that the average Western Taobao browser is probably so accustomed to the Asian models and artifacts that it hasn't even occurred to them how that might affect Lolita as a culture. With that in mind, the watermelon incident was merely an extension in micro form, and their ignorance surrounding other ethnicities is no grand revelation. That said, as prevalent as Taobao may be, Lolita fashion is still primarily associated with Japan. The small island nation is the birthplace of the fashion after all, and as the home of every brand that actually matters, we're going to focus on Japan. Because as much as there may be no love lost between the land of the rising sun and the Middle Kingdom, they do have one thing in common. Mainly that they're homogeneous as fuck. Gee willikers, Tyler, tell us something we don't know. First, shut up. Second, while I'm aware that the demographics of this country should be no secret to anyone in the Lolita fashion community, not everyone watching this show makes a point to routinely jerk it to everything Japan. Some people have actual lives, and for those of you out there not currently making a blood offering to customs in order to look like your grandmother's curtains, I would have you know the following. While the eternal pissing contest between Japan and China may have China winning in sheer numbers, when it comes down to homogeneity, Japan is currently stuffing its fist down China's throat. According to CIA.gov, 98.5% of Japan's population is ethnically Japanese, 0.5% are Korean, 0.4% are Chinese, and 0.6% are other. Granted, there is some disagreement on the exact qualifications of those numbers due to Japan apparently conflating nationality with ethnicity, but for the sake of basic understanding, we'll trust the CIA not to fuck us just this once. The thing I want you to focus on is that 0.6%, because that number is the most important thing in this entire debacle. Picture a room full of 100 people. You've lived in this room your entire life, and outside of occasionally looking out a window, these people are the only people you will ever see. Now, and this may surprise some of you who flushed your math book down the toilet the moment you graduated from any institution that hoped to cram the barest bit of knowledge into your thick skull, but there are no black people in this room. 0.6% means that, at best, one person is some glitchy-looking chimera that's half Japanese up top and God knows what on the bottom, and if you remember that that 0.6% contained the qualifier of other, you'll realize that there's no guarantee that that one half is even black. Other means literally anything beyond Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. The likelihood of the 0.6% minority bracket containing predominantly other Asian groups is a given. Any other ethnicities may as well be a freckle on that one half of one person, and when you stop to really think about it, you realize that if Japan would just be a little more like your average red-haired misfit, their representation would go through the roof. Or they'd get skin cancer. Poor Irish bastards. Angry Carrot Top comments aside, I see you typing. That 0.6% begs the question. What does Japan's lack of diversity mean for the Black Lolita community? Well, for one thing, it means this. That's a thing. At the same time that the watermelon incident made waves over in the States, in February of 2015, this was what blew up over international feeds. The photo features popular Momohiro Clover Z, rated most popular female idol group from 2013 to 2016, in blackface, kneeling in front of Rats and Star, a doo-wop inspired idol group that's been around since the 80s, also wearing blackface. It should be noted that the girl group does not usually paint themselves up like some douchebag sorority sisters attending a, hey, let's denigrate the stereotypes of a minority while also largely benefiting from their contributions to our culture because we obviously weren't beaten enough as children party. But Rats and Star have been doing this since the 80s. The two groups were set to appear on a Japanese TV show to promote a movie, and the only alleged reason that they were pulled from the show was that Bae McNeil from the Japan Times and Twitter hatched a complete shitstorm of horror and rage. This wasn't an outcry from the Japanese people. This was the social media accounts of the international stage collectively questioning the sanity of what they thought was just the island of mechas and precise dwarf bravery t-shirts that will give you courage the way God intended, in small doses and at the exact moment you really shouldn't have it. Rats and Star are signed by Sony, for God's sake, and if the most popular female idol group doesn't think twice about dunking themselves headfirst into a vat of shoe polish before appearing in public, it begs the question. 1, would the fumes really hurt them on a perceivable level because you have to be really fucking dumb to think this look was going to go over well in the first place? And 2, is Japan racist? To which the answer is, it's complicated. Kind of like the Facebook status, except not, because everyone knows Harold was caught sucking Jack's dick. Fellatio is not complicated, sweetheart. Your man's just a whore. Back to matters that are actually complicated. Japan doesn't have the nested history of black and white racial oppression that's so ingrained in places like the United States and South Africa. However, just because they can't call on melanin to decide who to treat like a venereal disease doesn't mean they haven't found wholly creative ways to be dicks to each other. Enter colorism, the go-to response when everyone's too similar to call boo and you can't find anything of substance to hate about another human being. OxfordDictionaries.com defines colorism as prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. The previous essentially means the darker you are, the more likely things are to suck for you in general. And while the practice is still overly common in the United States, the lack of ethnic-related ties to its enforcement set it apart from how it's done in a place like Japan. Because Japan doesn't have the same racial hierarchy as the US. So instances like this are not carried out with the same malignant intentions as they are in the States. But rather, excusable or not, with ignorance so thick you'd get a better understanding of race relations from a Novocaine-addled toddler. That said, Japan does have a preference for lighter skin tone so baked into its culture that there's an ancient Japanese proverb that basically translates to, pale skin will hide the 7 flaws. Which doesn't sound too bad until you realize that one of those 7 flaws implies looking like the bastard child of Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell. Sure, her face looks like the menage of a small child's nightmare baked in an easy-baked oven until it melts into a depressingly smug caricature of a human being, but so long as she's pale, you'll bang her brains out. Pallor is that preferred. This is to the extent that most of their beauty products tout skin brightening qualities, and the Ganguro movement rose from a distinct opposition to everything young women felt pressured to aesthetically be, which was pale, demure, and just like everyone else. The fact that the preference for pale skin was pronounced enough to be one of the founding pillars of a fashion that took pride in painting themselves New Jersey orange should tell you all that you need to know. Nobody's going to roll around in Cheetos without probable cause, and while the Ganguro girls may have largely disappeared from the streets of Japan, their stance against the expectations pitted against Japanese women reflect a tension Japan has yet to fully address. Because colorism is still very much a thing. Japan's lack of true racial divides provides a fertile breeding ground for making assumptions of people based only on the shade scale of their skin, and while it may not have the same effect as old-school ethnically based prejudice, eschewing those of darker skin tones from prominent positions in both media and society means the two are too similar to ignore it as mere preference. The demographics of Gothic Lolita wigs models perfectly illustrate the effects of such preference at play, and while lack of representation through a subpar wig provider may not be a matter of major societal importance, when you consider the current aesthetic climate of the subculture itself, it becomes more than just a minor player. Rather, it is a piece within a culture that is yet to open its arms to black Lolitas and darker shades in general. Which brings us to our final question. What does it really mean to be black and Lolita? Again, we look to the watermelon incident for our answer. This was possible because of ignorance. However, whether that sates your appetite for justice depends on if you think a business based in a state where a little over 1 in 10 people you should see will be black has earned the excuse. Because that is what it is. An excuse. Specifically, it's an excuse that relies on gaping holes in the culprit's ethnic awareness that is completely indefensible in a time when the flat borders of this world have been made permeable by the internet, the rise of social media, and the interconnected global community that has risen from the previous two. You would know this if you didn't spend all your time on cat videos, and you'll notice that the white cats aren't holding the brown cats solely responsible for the degradation of society as a whole. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. Not with this. Not for Japanese culture, and not for an industry that thinks to sell to and interact with lands and ethnicities past the familiar harbor of their own racial identity. However, until that expectation is embraced on a large scale, being black in Lolita will continue to mean the same thing. Excuses. Because that's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for watching Last Week Lolita News, and be sure to tune in next week when we tackle the tough questions like, was this video long enough? Are you sure you couldn't have made us want to jump in front of a moving bus just a little more? And what the hell, lady? I came here to laugh. Why you gotta make me feel like the mental equivalent of whatever the fuck this was supposed to be? Dear God, what's the point? BRB swallowing my mother's Vicodin. Next time on Last Week Lolita News. This has been Tyler. You've been watching Scarfing Scarves. And I'll catch you next time. Hey there, thanks for bearing with me through what I'm almost certain is going to make at least 50 people unsubscribe. I'd like to send an unbelievable thank you to my patrons whose support over the last month was the only divider between continuing this episode and being found drunk and belligerent at the local IHOP. And should you like to see me go back to content that doesn't make you want to Control-Z the entire human race, demand comprehensive coverage every time a full-grown woman loses their shit over a button, and have a vested interest in watching the slow decay of another human being to the point of institutionalization, release, only to be recommitted the next time someone says Lolita at heart, head over to patreon.com/lastweeklolita news. Thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you next time on Last Week Lolita News.